Alright guys, welcome back to another tier list, but this time it's not really a tier list, it's more like a top characters that you should choose when it comes to the selective hero summons that we're going to be given after 1 week of the check-in anniversary rewards, something like that. Here again, I have Tristan Wolf to help me with the tier list. As you can see here, we have a couple characters here that we are going to sort into S, A, B, C, and honorable mention. There's also a section here called not available in story summons that we are keeping here because there's no other way to get these characters aside from some, you know, some magic voodoo shit or pulling it on Covenant, so they have their own tier list. However, as always, my constant co-host for these tier lists is Tristan. Do you have anything to say?
No.
Okay, all right. Okay, so the first character we have on the list, Mr. Tristan, is we have Sharun. What do you think of Sharun?
Sharun's an injury unit and is only used in RTA, which is nice, but people that are looking at these lists are typically newer players. Maybe they want to break into RTA, but they're probably right on the cusp of that. She's a relatively low gear requirement unit to get into RTA, but she's not the easiest unit to use. You gotta set a team up around her. She's great at dealing with a lot of the HP scaling nightmares that are rolling around. I'd give her, I mean, if this was an RTA only tier list, I'd give her a really high placement, but I'm feeling B or C for Sharun just because other than RTA, she has zero use for you.
I also agree. I would say that it might be a little bit easier to see how people could maybe use Sharun in Guild War because there's no frenzy in a sense. So technically you could rope forever and try to injure with Sharun, assuming, you know, you have an unkillable team or something like that. However, I think just in general, like for how practical, even just gearing her is too, the best Sharun build, in my opinion, has something to do with like Celestine and counter plus, you know, etc. That gear is really not even that accessible because it requires you to have like a special set of gear and it's like pretty gear score requirement or pretty gear score intensive. But regardless, you know, she's obviously great for RTA. She does, you know, she does very well into the hand guy matchup. She does pretty well into the HP scaling bruisers. So I'm willing to put her at B as well to start. Maybe as we like, you know, we fold out the tier list, we can like move her around. Quick and simple. All right, perfect. Sharun at B. But if we move along, we should next have Lua, who is probably the hottest topic on this tier list.
Lua is exactly why I hate tier lists and why I hate making tier lists. The target audience for a tier list can't make a Lua. And if they try, it's a garbage can unit and they're going to get destroyed every time they try to use it. You either build her with a ton of ER, which means your other stats are going to suck, or you build her with a ton of speed, which means her ER stat sucks, or your effectiveness stat sucks.
Yeah, okay.
Right. Or you're going to build her and go, okay, now I need to put an artifact on her. Let's see, what's everyone running? Oh, it's a limited artifact. Oh, I don't have that artifact. I guess I can't use this unit. I think she is incredibly difficult to build. Probably one of the list of units we have here, arguably definitively the hardest unit to gear on our entire list. And without a limited artifact, she's not a real unit. Even if you have the gear, and even if you somehow get that limited artifact, when do you get into play her? I can't remember the last RTA match that she was allowed through. She's one of my better geared units, one of my highest win rate units when I get to pick her, but I can't good conscience recommend her to people on the list. You know, my heart wants to put her in S tier, but my conscience won't let me put her any higher than B, with a caveat that the reason she's so low is if you're looking at this list, you probably can't build her. Now, if you can build her, I almost wish we had a second S tier where it's like, if you can build it S tier, you know, if you have the limited artifacts and gear S tier. But yeah, I think the people that are going to look at this list, I would hate to put her all the way at the top because they're going to pick her and then they're going to get frustrated with the game and they're going to quit and they're going to leave a negative comment and downvote your video.
Okay, I'm going to do something special then here, Tristan, because I'm in complete agreement. I'm going to duplicate her, and you know, just for the sake of, you know, what we're talking about here, I agree. Like, Lua is one of these characters where if she's the fastest unit in the game and she's in the game is over. That's pretty much it. Yep. And there isn't a terrific answer to Lua right now. Everyone in the comment section will cope and say, oh, it's Lilius. Oh, it's okay, whatever. Anyways, copers. Generally speaking, Lua is pretty much, you know, especially when paired with a brain, fingers, and Spectre Tenebria or a book, this character is pretty much unbeatable. There isn't a lot to answer her in RTA right now. That's pretty much guaranteed, or that's pretty much widely accepted. That being said, while I do agree that she's really good and you do need high gear, I have seen some people use her at like the 250, 260 range, just so you can, you know, reset the hand guy. That's what I've seen. Now, obviously, if the Lua gets outsped and doesn't have Guiding Light and dies to the Zahhak, wrap it up. that is the last time you're ever going to use Lua. She fucking sucks. However, generally speaking, if you can kind of cope it through a little bit, I would honestly even take the risk of trying to play Lua like that, like at like that slower 250, 260 range. And, you know, honestly, the players you're probably playing against like are probably clueless and picking 5 knights anyways. But I digress. I completely agree with you. The gear requirement is way higher than literally any other character that we have on the list. So I am willing to duplicate it. I just think that if I put a tier list where Lua is an S, it feels like shit. But also, like, if I put her in S, it feels like shit. So I think what you really need is kind of like, I don't remember if you remember when we had the P-Flan in a tier list a little while ago. We just have 2 because it's...
The 2's good. The 2's good because it'll make people say, why is there 2, and look up the reason, as opposed to just seeing it and running.
Yeah, exactly.
Because she's got to have a limited artifact. I mean, she is as useless without Guiding Light as Pirate Flan is useless without Iseria's artifact. Very hard to pull off a successful run.
Now, again, I will say that there are people that don't run her with Guiding Light, but like when you don't run her with Guiding Light, the assumption
I love
is
those
that
people.
Yeah. Well, even not just that, like the assumption when you run a Lua without Guiding Light is that you're taking the turn over characters that you're supposed to get outsped by. So what I mean by that is like someone like Elv, for instance, right? Like, you know, Elv, notorious, like fast player. If he runs his 311 Lua into you and he doesn't run Guiding Light because, you know, he wants Song of Stars to stop Fire Lilius from doing something. Okay, well, guess what? That's Elv. You know what? Like,
right.
Admittedly, like you can do that and you get some value out of like gear gapping people. You know, people do use Guiding Light on Lua, or, you know, Lua is more versatile on Guiding Light, which is why people use it like that. So in that case, and, you know, we haven't really fully seen how good Lilius is currently against Lua at the time of this recording. So as it is right now, no artifact or, you know, no speed, Lua's B. With both and like normal Lua and you have the gear, Lua's an S, which is obvious. Great.
I will throw one last caveat in, is that when it comes to Lua, if the only limiting factor you have is Guiding Light, if you can actually build a decent one, 250, 260, 280, 350, if you can build a really good Lua, but you don't have Guiding Light and that's your holdup, we're due. Custom Summon Banner is due. Probably in the next 3 to 6 months, closer to 3 than the 6. I would be shook if we don't see it by the end of the year. With that coming around the corner, if there's a limited artifact that's stopping you from picking a unit, you know, something along those veins, you'll probably have that banner before you're finished building this unit anyway.
Good point. I agree. So that's Lua. If we want to move along, though, we have one of the characters that I'm going to take the reins to begin with, Tristan, really quick, which is Iseria. Now, the thing about Iseria, and I'm going to put her very quickly into the honorable mentions, is that this character is terrific. Probably one of the best PvE characters in the game, holding hands and, you know, in a Congo line alongside characters like Tamarinne, Roana, Destina, etc. Because she does it all. She has a strip, you know, reset someone's skills. She has another strip on her S1. If you run her with like Flan's artifact, you have souls. She can hold Sashi, she can hold prophetic candlestick, everyone can, but she can get up like her skill resets and all that, and it's just terrific for any content. For Guild War, if you're using with Decor, if you're using Nightmare Raid to, you know, to do some funky shit against the queen, it doesn't matter. This character is great. However, although she would be probably an S tier character in terms of how good she is, you're supposed to ideally get her from the selective summons at the very start of the game, and I believe she does also have I think you can also story summon her, if I'm not mistaken.
You can.
Yeah,
you can.
So that being the case, it's not super worth it for you to actually pick Iseria here, although she is insanely strong. Tristan, if you'd like to elaborate, you can, you know, or give your thoughts, you can.
If you're rolling into this selective summon and you don't have Iseria, you messed up and this is your chance to fix it. Maybe you got bad advice. Maybe you started far enough back that Iseria wasn't the most important selective summon pick, and you just had horrible luck and didn't get her organically. And maybe you're saving up your bookmarks for that custom summon and you don't want to story summon her. This is your chance. This Iseria is a unit that needs to be on your account. So yeah, I'm fine with her being an honorable mention because you already had 2, maybe 3 shots to get this unit. So the only reason to pick it here is because you missed the shot. You missed your chance before, and now's your time to grab her.
I agree. Even nowadays, you know, some people argue like maybe there's even like some alternatives to her, like Rima also skill resets. That's besides the point though. Like she's still really, you know, she's pretty much cream of the crop when it comes to, you know,
She skill resets, she strips, she defense breaks on multiple skills. She can wear Song of Stars, she can wear Bloodstone. No, there's no unit like her in the game, and that's why she is the #1 pick from your starter summons.
Okay, yep, I agree. Honorable mention, again, I'm sure if we could, we would put her higher, but like, you know, she's in that category for a reason. And I think someone that's kind of holding hands with her, you know, doesn't feel right to mention Iseria without mentioning her. Tristan, what do you think about Tamarinne?
Exact same situation, with the exception of you didn't selective summon her. You got the story summons. You pick this unit up from story summons to go with your Iseria. Those two go hand in hand. If you don't have them, you're going to struggle with a lot of intro level PvE. You're going to struggle with a lot of the labyrinth, a ton of the abyss, a little bit of expeditions. But she's a unit that is just kind of universally accepted that if you're giving advice to a brand new player and he says, what do I go for? It's like you get Iseria from your 30 selector, and then as soon as you unlock story summons, you summon Tamarinne. So same situation. If you missed the boat and you didn't follow those steps, now's your chance to fix your account. But she's literally I'm not picking this unit because she's better than other units or because she's super important end game. No, neither of those units are important end game, but they're important to get you to end game. So you get them now to fix your account so you can progress to end game. Otherwise, you move on.
And again, it is insane how much easier the early game is when you have these two characters, especially with the new stuff. And not a plug for EpicSeven, but like there's the new returner gear, which looks fucking terrific, by the way. And if you have that and you have an account that starts with Tama, Iseria, and this next character we're gonna mention here in a sec, the game is easy peasy lemon squeezy. Like you should probably not struggle with anything until probably like Challenger Arena. If someone were to restart right now with like the returner gear or whatever and got like the 3 characters we're about to mention, you're probably chilling until, you know, literally just Challenger Arena, right? In my opinion, I think you know, Tamarinne's also in the honorable mentions. Terrific character, just outstanding. The cleanse, the strip, the attack buff, the CR push. There's no other character like her, just like Iseria. So I'll leave her in honorable mentions and we can move on. What do you think, Tristan, of Roana?
I think she's got more thigh meat than a bucket of KFC. As a unit to pick from the selector. People throw the phrase must pick around a lot, and usually it's not true. But with Roana, it is. If you don't have this unit on your account, you don't have a good account. There's no such thing as a good account that doesn't have Roana on it. She is used in every aspect of the game. She's used in RTA, she's used in Arena, she's used in Guild Wars, Expeditions, Abyss, heck, and Ancient Inheritance. I think Hunts are the only place she isn't used, and she is usable in Hunts on the Katie's team. She is the best unit, and if you don't have this unit, she is the unit you pick, bar none. I don't care if you don't like the way she looks, I don't care if you don't like her voice lines, she doesn't even take good gear. You can put the free, she just needs 6 pieces of gear. They don't even have to be the same set. Yeah, there is no excuse to not have this unit. You pick this unit, you get her on your account, and everything becomes easier to do, and that makes you able to build your account faster to get where you need to be. You
know, she's one of the rare characters that we're going to be mentioning on this list, by the way, that is really good early on, right? And you can slam gear on, and, you know, just to piggyback off of what you're saying, she also does well late game because she then transitions from being someone that you use in early stuff, like maybe your early Arena or something, Abyss, and then she transitions into being like a great Nightmare character, great for expos, like, you know, level 3 expos. When you start doing, you know, RTA, she's a great character there. In some Arena or Guild War teams, sometimes people are just gonna run counter units into you, and you just need something to beat up the ugly counter characters in the game or extra attack characters in the game, and that's Roana. So I think she probably handholds with Lua. I mean, if you want to put her in front of Lua,
no, she should be in a tier above Lua.
Wow.
She is.
You think so?
I think she makes Lua look pathetic as far as usability on your account, ease of building. She doesn't even have to be conscious. She can be stunned and slept at the same time, and she still heckin' works on your team. She can be 99 speed with the free HP set, and she still works on your team. And I'm not just talking about PvE. I'm talking about high-level RTA. Just works. Everywhere she just works. She is probably one of the most important units to have. I can't say any more than that. If you don't have her and you don't pick this unit, you must hate winning. That's all I gotta say.
I am down. I don't know if I would make her a whole extra tier, because then that would insinuate that Lua is not S tier. I will relent and put her ahead of Lua. Like, you do make a good case. Everything about the game is so much easier and so much more accessible once you have her. So I am definitely willing to put her in S. Like, again, imagine if you're like, haha, Lua A. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't look right. It doesn't look right. You know what I mean? Like the 310 Lua that just reset your whole team, your family, like your lineage. It's a little rough for me to put her below. But like this is, this is a bit of like a semantics thing. Obviously, they're both terrific characters. So,
hey guys, you remember in chapter 4 when a 14-year-old boy one-shot Lua in story? You know who he couldn't do that to? Roana.
I mean,
and if he tried, she'd come right back because she's got rays. She's got rays in her kit.
I mean, to be fair, and again, guys, I understand like this is for new players, but this is like telling a new player not to pick C. Lilius because we're assuming that they'll never have the gear for C. Lilius. It's like, okay, they won't have the gear for a little while, but like after you get the character, if you don't have Lua, what are you gonna?
I don't know.
Oh,
I think it's more like telling people not to pick Rylet because they don't have the gear for Rylet, but Roana is C. Lilius. I don't know, man. Your tier list, you do what you want. I think I'm fine with them both being in the same tier. A well-geared Lua being in the same tier with a crap-geared Roana. I'm kind of cool with that.
I mean, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, I'm down. We were just talking about the other really good Soul Weaver on this tier list, but here we have Destina. What do you think about Destina?
Yeah. I think the Beast of the West gives newer players access to Rays, and there was a time when she was tough to use. She wasn't that good, but since her buffs, giving her CR mobility, her EEs especially, she's become a very viable unit for a lot of PvE. She makes a lot of makes the Nightmare Carcanas possible. She's really good in a lot of abyss floors. She can be a great backup plan, life insurance policy when you're going into Guild Wars.
Yeah.
So I'd stick her up in 8 or S tier as well, just because she's the only unit on the list that gives new players access to Rays, which solve a lot of problems. She's a great facilitator in Guild Wars. She's really good in early Arena. She can be a good defense unit on Arena, and eventually when you do push up into RTA, you can gear her up and use her there as well in certain comps. Again, she's future proof. She'll grow with the account.
And again, like kind of like as I mentioned, I don't know if Destina is quite as usable as Roana on the same level.
Oh, nowhere near. She is far right side.
But I will say that again, as a character who kind of does well both in, I would say, the early, mid, and late game, she has a bit too much value to kind of overlook her. The versatility of EEs is something that I think like a lot of people don't necessarily underrate, but like when you have the 2, right, you cleanse on S1, like that Carcanis fight, I'm thinking of the Julevi fight where it like debuffs you like constantly, just like the insurance policy, especially if you don't want to invest in Ray or have Ray even with like the debuffs on S1, or fuck it, honestly, if you want to use both of them, your team is never dying. And like the honest to God truth is that having this character, again, not quite the same level as having, in my opinion, like Roana or Lua, but she's kind of like Tamarinne. You need a Soul Weaver for every occasion, and she definitely has situations where you need like the full cleanse, or you need like the CR push, or you need the constant healing, or you need the cleanse on S1. A lot of these characters, Roana and Tamarinne included, they have a couple of timeable big cleanses, but no one cleanses quite the same as Destina, especially when you have the S1 EE on. As you mentioned, Guild War and Arena, there isn't someone that just revives the whole fucking team and is also grass and also doesn't die to Choux and stuff, right? Go ahead and pick Tamarinne or Roana into, Choux and stuff like that, and there's probably, I mean, realistically, for Choux, you would just take Destina and Roana. However, like in terms of, value, you can't take Amelia, you can't take other Soul Weavers to fight some Guild War teams, and Destina does the job very well. That's why I leave her in S. Okay, next we have Yulha, where I think this is where our opinions are kind of gonna split off a little bit. I'm curious where you'll put her, but I don't want to bias my own opinion. So what I will say about Yulha, when I look at like the other characters on this list, it is understandable that some characters are more usable, less usable. In my eyes, Yulha is not an S tier character. She's not, an honorable mentions or C tier character. I think she plants herself directly in A, and I think Krau should probably also follow suit. And the reason why is because she's what I like to kind of consider like a crutch character at times. Arguably so, for a lot of newer players or like early mid-game players. Sometimes you don't have anything to kill a super evasion focused team composition in Guild War Arena, or you sometimes just don't have the answer to someone like Ed or, like a water unit, for instance, Choux perhaps. And that's where I think Yulha comes in, and she does very well, and she's obviously a decent knight. However, as I think the game goes on and on and on, you'll notice you don't really use her in any PvE. And even in RTA, her usage is there. Like, you definitely see her on occasion, but, with other characters in the loop, like, Cleavers running amok, you have Injury from Alencia, you have Bellion, whatever you want to call it, I think her usage drops a little bit. I'm not sighing or like, scratching my head like, oh my god, when am I ever gonna pick against the Yulha? I see it as a strong pick. You're going to use her. She's kind of the same way for Guild War and, you know, Arena, any other content like that. Solid choice. It's one of the first units that I grab for, especially when I know I need to just nuke something with a horse or with like an unmitigated skill 3. I personally can't put her any higher than A. I would probably put her no lower than B, but what do you think, Tristan?
Just point of clarification here. I assume the way we're ranking these here is where S tier is basically a must-have unit, whereas A tier is like, you know, meta top shelf unit, and then B tier is a great unit, and C tier is a really, really good unit. D through F tier, which aren't even shown here, is everything on the right-hand side of the screen.
Yeah.
We're not saying because something is in C tier, it's garbage. If it wasn't so cringe, I'd say you'd almost want to do triple S, double S, S, and A for your tiers. People immediately flame on tier lists that are built like that. When I say that I think she is B or C tier, it's because it's not that I'm saying she is a terrible unit. I'm just saying that if we're going to treat the tiers the way I think we're treating them, what makes Yulha great is she stays alive and solos teams that when you otherwise would have lost, right? She heals herself up with her S3. She ignores mitigation. She's got a horse-like skill.
Yeah.
She doesn't do a lot to keep the rest of your team alive, but I've been in a lot of fights where I misjudged speed. I got RNL'd, and my entire team's dead except Yula's clinging to life with 25% health, and she takes out all 3 of the other units. Not a lot of units can do that. And much like Destina, she grows with the account. As you get better, you can do more things with her, and you can take her into RTA. But she doesn't have any other PvE usage. If you want to fight a god-awful slow arena fight, you can use her. I mean, pretty much you're just using her in Guild War and later in life in RTA. I've used her a lot in RTA. I first picked her in RTA and had success with her. I think she's a great unit, but again, that's for end game players. For early to mid game players, I think they pick Yulha and they go, wow, where do I use this now? Cannaaaa said to get this unit, it must be good. Where do I use it? How do I gear it? What's her purpose? I'm not ever using this unit. She can't even walk dogs if we walk dogs anymore.
Yep.
So I would put her at the bottom of B, top of C, to be honest with you, just because she is a good unit. She is a very usable and useful unit and a great tool to have in your tool belt, but you're not going to use her everywhere. I'm really trying to get over the concept of C is bad. C is just a bad unit, and we're recommending against that. We really need to drive home that no, the bad units are on tiers that are unlisted, and it's the hundreds of other units that you could be picking.
The other thing I do want to mention is that for as much as she's nice for Guild War, it's not a guaranteed win, but you know, a lot of the times when I see people say like, oh yeah, and you used like you would take Yulha here, or you would take Krau here, you might not have a 100% win rate, but I have almost never found a situation where if someone doesn't have Yulha, like a character like Araz or Airwell would just immediately kill you. Like you would just lose the fight, like outright, just because you don't have Yulha, which I think is, you know, something that is worth considering as well.
Sure.
When placing her. It's not like the biggest factor, to be clear. And again, I do think she's like a great Guild War character, but I am willing to, you know, drop her down to the B. As you say, not unusable characters. This is a tier list that says best character to choose from selector, okay? And this is of the characters that you would already pick. This is where you would rate them, right? So for me, I see it as a C. And, you know, maybe I should clarify that in the intro next time, or like in the intro, I should maybe have like a little explanation that it is the best character to choose from, and it's not like an overall tier list of all the characters. But yeah, I believe she's also in B. I'm fine with putting her in B.
Okay, could I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Without naming any names, just a quick glance. When you look at the bottom row there, do you see anybody that belongs lower than Yulha on the list?
Yes.
Okay. Then we can move on.
So if we want to move along to the tier list, if we move along on the tier list, we now have a funny fellow, Krau. What do you think about Krau?
Krau's blue Yulha. The difference between Krau and Yulha is Krau can help protect the team, right? He can give defense buffs to the entire team, so he's a little bit better at keeping your team alive. Yula's a little bit more selfish. She buries herself and protects herself. Krau defense buffs the team and protects the team. But other than that, in their elements, they're used in the same method. Krau is a little bit more vulnerable to Alencia just because of elemental issues, both being HP scalers. I would rate him just like that, right below Yulha, because I think Yulha has, in that capacity, she's got more applications, but they're basically the same unit as far as Guild Wars is concerned. When you get to RTA, Yulha can still be used, Krau really can't.
Yeah. So
you've got a little bit more future proof in Yulha than you do in Krau. So I would put Krau either in C or right beside Yulha in B.
I would definitely. So here's my main thing about Krau. If I just kind of reiterate what I went over with Yulha, I personally, from my own personal experience, I know like you guys are gonna say like, well, he cleaves, or he's cleaver bias. Sincerely, I'm like one of these people that will I myself have decored 5 or like 8 times in like the past maybe like 20 guild wars, which is embarrassing to say for some people, but a win is a win. But I understand what it means when you just do what you gotta do, you don't care, like you're getting the win, and like sometimes you need to use units that you don't have access to. I've lost Yulha, I've lost characters in guild wars before, so I've had to have alternatives. You will not die on impact if you have to use a knight like Araz, Arawal. Pilis is actually probably better a lot of times than characters like Yulha and stuff, or is safer in some team compositions, especially when you pair them with special units. However, the point of contention for me is that while I definitely would pair, Yulha and Krau together, Krau is probably one of the between the two that I would sincerely consider dropping to C. I personally wouldn't put Yulha in C, but I would seriously consider putting Krau in C, because the main function of Yulha is the ignore mid aspect of her horse, and Krau's doesn't ignore mid. Now, again, he does give defense buff, but nowadays, you want defense buff? Great, Summer Luluka. Or, hear me out, proc the Lionheart Senya. Like, there's a lot of different ways to get defense buff, or defense buff is just not really necessarily, it was just not that necessary. So for me, I find him more replaceable than Yulha. Like, a lot of these two characters' kits are always discussed when it comes to, or discussed in relation to how good their S3 is, or how good they are with mitigation. Sometimes my Krau doesn't even get a turn, and my Krau is like sometimes 200 speed. Or like the defense buff gets unbuffable. So, and he's rarely, if ever, even fucking pickable in RTA. And that's its own can of worms. So for me, I leave him as probably the worst character in B, the highest character in C. But that's where I have Krau. I know I want to only keep this to about like 4 minutes per thing, so we'll move on from that.
I will say that you will find yourself picking Krau more often than Yulha in Guild Wars, but you'll find yourself picking Yulha way more than Krau once you get to that higher level in RTA.
Okay, now what do you think about Zahhak? If you want, actually, I'll go first.
Yeah, you go first, because Zahhak's a bit of a tricky one.
The only reason that I mentioned Zahhak, you weren't here for this, but I had originally mentioned that if I had mentioned Zahhak, he would be in the honorable mentions tier. If I'm not mistaken, are you able to pick him from the... You are. Okay, so here's the thing about Zahhak. I get it, guys. I am very much in your camp. Fuck Aiden. Like, Aiden is one of the most obscene characters I've ever seen in my entire life. Fat cat pickers actually suck my balls, okay? However, a lot of times when you have Zahhak, there's probably another playstyle you could have done, or like there's, for as much as I'd love to use Zahhak to kill Aiden every time, sometimes Karina, or sometimes, like a knight, or, Emma Landy, a lot of these other characters are popping up. Even Senya can sometimes do what Zahhak does. I'm not saying Zahhak does not absolutely, like, Giga Chad beat the shit out of, teams that have Aiden in them, but you can't pick Zahhak into C. Lilius. I'm sorry I nitpick and talk about RTA, but there's a lot of things that restrict Zahhak, and he's a great character that you can pick against certain characters, but he has equally as many counters as the things that he counters, and his gear is pretty specific and kind of special. He's not the hardest character in the world to gear, because he does kind of get away with having 50 crit chance, or even lower if you want to fuck around and find out, in all honesty. Compared to some of the other characters we have on this list, Krau, Yulha, Lua, like Roana, Destina, how good they are in PvP, like all these other things, that plus the fact that you can get him from the story summon, I'm inclined to either leave him in the honorable section or leave him in C, the very lowest of C. That's where I would put Zahhak in my eyes. But what do you think? What do you think, Tristan?
I am honestly leaning towards pushing him into A tier just because of how much of an issue evasion's becoming. It used to just be Aiden. But we're starting to see a lot more Rylet. We're seeing a lot more HP scalers, and he's got a huge chunk of injury on his S3 without needing injury, plus the gold shield for survivability, plus the burns for extra damage. The only detractors to Zahhak really is he's outpaced by an ML4 unit, and the meta has slowed down enough. When he's picked into the right place, he's just terrible to deal with.
Can I ask?
And his other biggest detractor is he's got the Lua issue. He's tough to gear.
I was gonna say, do you think the average person can make a usable Zahhak?
I think Zahhak scales with the level of RTA you're playing in. I think I think a lower gear necessity for people who are fighting in gold and masters and even challenger than people who are pushing into high champions and emperor. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think he is a very good versatile usable unit, especially in arena, or sorry, especially in RTA, but also usable in guild wars for when people have annoying crap on their defense like Aiden.
What do you think about the fact that he's available in story summon? The fact that the only PvE you can kind of use him in is Nightmare Raid. Like, because does that change your mind at all? Because A is relatively high. Now, yep. I'm willing to like drag up a little bit. Like, if you want to put bottom of B, I could see that if you want to like negotiate that. What would you like? Do you think that him, compared to the other characters here, being summonable on like the story summons and stuff, like, do you think it's kind of like a Yulha Krau case, because they are also available in the story summons?
I think when you're in lower arena, you fight a lot of Aidens and you fight a lot of Apocs, and he's really good against that. I think when you're in Guild Wars, you fight a lot of evasion and HP scaling units like Choux and Apoc and Aiden and even some Violets and Rylets. I think the resource reduction also reduces the amount of
gear score
gear score that he needs. I don't know. I'm feeling really good about him on top of B, bottom of A. So if you want to stick them in B, I'll acquiesce. Okay. But
the only thing that I kind of want to mention about the Zahhak thing is that while I know that like a lot of this tier list will kind of cater to people that need like to understand how the game works, and this isn't like a specifically like newbie friendly, or like only if you don't have these, if you're only below like a certain rank tier, like pick video. That's not necessarily the entire focus of the video. I do think that for me, it would be so tough, because even if I were coming in for the first time, if I were to say, like enter into the stream and say, hey, Tristan Wolf told me to pick, Zahhak, Yulha, and Krau, but now I have like these weird banners. Like, I have their banners in my pocket. Like, what do I do with the banners? I think that is like a bit of like a question mark. I don't really know what I would do either, for transparency. However, I think that you're right. You definitely fight a lot of like lower characters, but it is important. And again, he's not bad later, but it is important to remember that not just focusing on newbie, but like in terms of long-term investment, is the character good? And he is. So like, to be clear, like you're right in rating him as like a better than, C or maybe honorable mention character.
Nietzsche's really echoing my thoughts here. So he's saying in lower ELOs you fight a lot of evasion units, and it feels a lot more free to play in those levels when you've got an answer to evasion. And looking at him sitting beside Krau, I'm like, how do you not pick Zahhak over Krau? You see okay a lot of like things that he deals with. Yeah, I'd still put him in A, but if you want him in B, I'll acquiesce. I think he is even though he takes a high end of gear, he grows with the account. He's usable at lower levels with lower gear, and as your account grows, he gets better. And he's a problem solver. He's not a unit you're going to mainline or run first, but he solves problems that you're going to have growing up.
Sorry, not to interrupt you. I will actually put him at the top of B, because I just realized he also counters Senya. And Senya is someone that we're going to mention on this tier list. She is actually a big problem.
He's great into focus units too. With resource reduction, he's great into focus units, and we're running into a lot of those.
Zahhak can guaranteed crit Emma Landy too, right? That's how he works?
Yes, I believe
Assuming you're 100%. Okay, I'm willing to put him at the top. Wait, can he not? Even with the 100 crit chance? 20% chance?
20% chance to miss?
But you would still probably, like...
It's better than 50.
Yeah, come on, guys. Your options to kill Emma Landy are not very good. Yeah, but he also has like the built-in crit, right?
He has built-in hit, but at 50 crit, he's got 100 crit. He's got built-in.
Oh yeah, and yeah. Okay,
so if you built him at 100% crit, he would technically be 150% crit if you build him at 100 crit.
Okay, I'm down for a B. That sounds good to me. Moving along, we have the other grass unit who's kind of a DPS and kind of making a name for himself. What do you think about Vildred? Actually, do you want me to go first with Vildred? Because I'm not sure if you would have put Vildred in here, but I kind of like forced you into like this list a little bit. Would you like to go first?
I'd like to see where you put him.
Okay, I put Vildred as an honorable mention. I think it is impossible for me to not mention him at the very minimum. Now, you're gonna probably ask why, and here's a couple things that you have when you do pick Vildred. Hands down, the best Azumaniac like auto farmer, which, you know, what is that even worth anymore?
Hey, that's where you get rage sets.
Anyways, just you have the only character in the game that has speed as an imprint and is a 5-star. You have a character who, for all intents and purposes, is pretty much mandatory if you're going to use a character like Wanderer Silk. Now, again, I know the last 2 points are kind of similar in him being a speed imprint or like having some sort of correlation to cleave and blah, 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 okay, cleave bias, I apologize. Like, he's an honorable mention. He's not even on like the fucking tier list by our standards. Now, again, assuming you have everything else, I do think it's worth considering, hey, am I at 10 or like 8 or something? Or, you know, do I have a dupe Vildred and I could make my Vildred 12 speed after, you know, 2 copies or something like that? Worth it, you know? Like that sounds great, because in all honesty, especially if you're trying to play a faster playstyle, or if, fuck it, you really want to kill someone like Sharun or a character that needs to get hit twice in order to die, like Spirit Eye Celine, and you have Vildred on your team, that's worth considering, right? Now, it goes a bit deeper like that, and I'm talking about RTA. However, like the PvE viability is also there. Assuming for some reason you absolutely fucking hate warriors and, you know, free spirits, you can use Vildred as your story clear, your unrecorded history, or, you know, if you've already have him, you can obviously use him. A lot of characters or a lot of people didn't use free spirit in the past, but anyways, Vildred, I think, is worth it just for like the uniqueness of his kit. Go ahead, Tristan. What do you think?
Yeah, only 5-star with the speed imprint, huge. Only 4 zone targeted plus 12 speed imprint in the game. But that's an investment. That's, unless you're going to dump all your slates, that's a down the road investment with effort to push into his banner when it pops up. Aside from the speed imprint, he is a D tier unrecorded history farmer. You'll get much more mileage out of Free Spirit Tierria, who does the same thing as Vildred with faster skill animations, and she doesn't have elemental issues like Vildred. I think you're limited to unrecorded 25 or 26 before you run into fire units, and heck, even the level 35 one, if you're using Vildred Cavill, Tierria Cavill is just better, because when Tierria does her thing on that 3rd round, she gives Cavill immunity, so he can't be attack broken. She's just pound for pound better. Heck, she might even be better than RB because of the speed difference if you can build her.
Yep.
So as a farmer, he is almost as bad as Lena, you know, the muscle girl. She's almost a better farmer than he is. In fact, she might be a better farmer than he is with the animation differences, because he has to activate his secondary skill. Right. Elemental differences, of course, right. He's a great supplemental damage dealer. He's great cleanup after you've done high aggro or cleave. But you're talking about some end game stuff with some end game gear, running some end game units. I think honorable mention's fine, because you're buying him as an investment. You're probably not going to use him much outside of story clear and maybe a little bit of PvE usage here and there, like Asmanic.
I will say, we are starting to hit that point, Tristan, in EpicSeven, where people are starting not to have RB. The other day, I looked at someone's account who did not have RB, because it's been that long since RB was considered dog shit. Like, again, not to say that, you know, free spirit is just like, you know, obviously going to be the best, but outside of free spirit, you know, some people are struggling a little bit with who their AoE characters are.
The only reason I use RB at all is because he's easier to gear than Free Spirit.
Yep.
I've got two RBs, and one of them's barely used.
Are you fine with putting him in honorable mention?
Yeah, honorable or C, either one.
Okay. All right, that sounds good with me. I think you're actually one of the few people that has a fucking second of... I think you might... Do you have 3 of this character? What do you think about Politis?
I only have 2 Politis. The people that she bothers ban her.
Yep.
Outside of Guild Wars, what's nice about Politis is her diversity. She can be built as a DPS unit to assist cleave, or she can be built tanky bruiser to resist cleave. I begrudgingly want to put her in A tier, just because of the variety of gear she has and the number of roles she can fill. The meta shifts to a cleave heavy meta. You can bruiser her up, slap Abyssal on her, or Sierra Ren on her, and a lot of effectiveness and not much damage, and just annoy the piss out of your opponent. If you decide you want to become part of the problem rather than the solution, you can put some serious speed DPS gear on her and rip people apart with your own cleave and not have to worry about banning her because you're actually using her. Yeah, I think I'm okay. Yeah, I'm part of the problem too, Seka. Okay. This whole channel is about being part of that problem.
All right, I fought you on the Zahhak thing. Although, personally, I would be inclined to put Politis in B, because I can think of no better character than Politis to pick from the second selective summon. And you really won't be using Politis in general until at least you've cleared the second selective summon, like episode 2 or episode 3. I don't find her that valuable in PvE. And like in PvP, it is as you say, she's gonna be banned on 5th, or like she's gonna be banned on 5. But the people that are annoyed by her are gonna ban her anyway. So it's kind of like a, do you ban Bellion or do you gear Bellion? Do you have Lua or do you ban like it's one of these things where she's only PvP, like, you know, she's only PvP focused. And even then, though she is very good and she holds back, you know, the walls, she holds back the walls, she also gets banned a lot. I am willing to put her at A alongside like the way that you describe her. However, I could definitely see people saying like, oh, Politis, but I get her anyways. Like, do I need a second Politis? Like, and the answer is like, yeah, you could probably run a second Politis. But in general, I find her to be an A tier character, or I find her to be a top of B or like mid B character. I am okay with relenting and putting her at A though. That's like I am not, you know, losing sleep over putting Politis in A.
Here's my one last pitch for her in A. Right.
Okay.
We talked about, you know, tier lists being for targeting early and mid game players, and early and mid game players who are breaking into lower level RTA. As much as they struggle with dealing with evasion units, they struggle more with being cleaved. It's not like it is up here for me and definitely not for you, where getting cleaved doesn't happen terribly often. It's usually as a reaction to, oh, clearly Canna's cleaving, I'll cleave him right back. But you watch some of the top end players play, and you see cleave pick less than 20% of the time. You go down and watch some of these newer streamers fighting down in gold and master. You still see Iseria cleaves. In fact, Iseria is probably the easiest way to get to masters at a lower level. Cleave's common because it's fast and it's easy.
That's fair.
I think having a way to deal with that. Nobody likes being cleaved. Even cleavers don't like being cleaved. She assists. She's an answer to that. I like her at a lower level.
I'm sold. I'm down. We said our piece about Politis. But one of the characters I think is also kind of like a noob trap. What do you think about Senya?
I think even cleavers don't like being cleaved, and at a lower level, it's good to have answers to being cleaved. I'm not talking about Senya anymore. I'm still talking, or Politis anymore. I'm still talking about Senya.
Okay, yeah.
Here's the problem with Senya, is she's tougher to run without her own artifact, but unlike other units, she's not impossible. You can put Holy Sacrifice on her. You can put
Elbrus or something like that.
Yeah, some Elbrus style artifacts on her. There's answers other than her own artifact, though her own artifact is best in slot. So it's easier to go for Senya on her own banner. She is a story banner, so you can go for her there and get her artifact and boom, be one and done. But I think she is a really important unit if you want to have any chance to, you know, defend in Guild War. I think she's great on defense in Arena, less so now than she used to be with the induction of having boats thrown at your head all the time. But yeah, I would be tempted to put her in B and C. Even a mediocre geared Senya can solo teams in lower RTA and in lower Arena, and she gives you a good amount of cleave resistance. I'm thinking bottom of A, top of B is kind of where I'm feeling for, but she is a little tougher to gear than some units, and the artifact is a little difficult. So I'm flexible on it, but that's kind of my thought on her.
She is definitely, again, this is probably going in my, I think this last four column that we have here is going to be a bit rough to go through. Just because I think just based on how the day works, or just on how like you feel on the day, I think my answer for these 4 characters can change. Now, we're obviously talking about Senya here. Here's my problem that I have with Senya. A Senya will work depending on how clueless or how dumb your opponent is, or how bad their gear is, which is kind of like it's just kind of like a weird gamble. You know what I mean? Now, it's one thing if you get cleaved by something, right? Some people just simply don't have the gear, right? But there is a really big difference between a Senya that doesn't get debuffed by anything, and a Senya that, you know, gets death broken by Ran, and then like suddenly whatever other character you have just crits and kills her, right? Like a Senya that doesn't have a bare minimum level of gear is not pickable. And I understand what you mean by this. Like, she's not that hard to gear. It's just the gear that you don't like on your other characters is probably going on to Senya. Attack, F-res, defense, or like attack, defense, HP, speed, no crit chance. You're like, ew, this gear sucks. All right, put it on your Senya. Hell, I mean, honestly, some of the bullshit that they give you with like the lifesteal gear, like some of that shit, like I think my highest gear score neck on my account is that lifesteal neck that we have. It's like attack that you get from like the Galavite set or whatever. And that was on my Senya for like a little while when I was running like lifesteal F Senya. It was a different time. But regardless, you know, I think you can definitely argue, especially without her artifact, she definitely suffers a little bit, right? Not enough to say that she's unusable. I think for me to go above C, I think is a little rough. And I think it is going to be a little bit rough for me for the next characters as well.
Sure,
because when I look at all the other characters, like, yes, having Senya would be great. But, like, you know what's better than having Senya to put on Guild War defense? Having Yulha to just kill the fucking Senya next time. Or, like, having, you know, having Lua, having Zahhak, having Polly, having Destina to just run the Senya over in, like, a 50-50. You know what I mean? So, for me...
Say less. You convinced me.
Yeah.
I'm good with her on C.
So, with that in mind, though, what do you think about Choux? Who's, you know, I mentioned it before, who's the Jesse to our James here. What do you think about Choux?
She's no different than Senya, except that Senya wins through mechanics, Choux wins through RNG. For her to work really, really well and be the XDD nightmare, it takes a higher level of gear than most people who look at tier lists will have. Yeah, Choux may be colorblind. She hits my Destina every time, twice, crits every time.
Yep.
But at the level of gearing that people are going to be at when they're building off this tier list, they're going to make terrible shoes, and their rats just aren't going to work as well. She'll have to really pop off, like on a meme level pop off for them to get mileage out of her. I think honestly, the biggest reason to pick Choux might be if you get ML Choux.
yeah. Like,
and she's every bit as good as Senya is on defense. So in fact, they run well together on defense. But I was just reading what Coca-Cola picked. He said he picked Choux last year, and I got ready to pop off. He said, and regret it. I'm like, okay. I was like, yeah. She was a staple part of my defense last year. I used her in just about every Guild War. She let me hold low legend in arena without having to check my account. Things change, man. A lot of things have changed. Anti-crit everywhere. Units that stop people from counterattacking. Frickin' Roana. So yeah, I think her stock is down quite a bit.
I think this is also one of those things where I don't think people really grasp how bad Choux is without like a decent stat line. If you, again, I'm not trying to like target anyone, but if you have like a sub 20,000 HP Choux with like below 250 crit damage, this is a useless character. Like, honest to God, there's no reason to pick this character if you actually have like really, really bad gear on this character, because like her S1, you don't have molas and stuff in her kit. This is like, you know, and again, I know molas are really important, but like free to play players, new players, sometimes, you know, you don't mola the Krau S1, right? You don't mola the Yulha S1. Maybe you don't increase like the S2 on Sharun. If you aren't plus 30 on Choux, you might just be useless. Like, no joke. And again, Politis can like maybe get away with some damage on missing on S3, or like maybe Roana's S2 hasn't been maxed, her S1, her S3 not maxed. This Choux character is kind of similar to someone, you know, like Vildred, where if everything's not maxed, you're like, oh my God, was it even worth it? Like, maybe I should just gotten an imprint for someone else or picked someone else entirely.
Yeah, you can't half-ass your rat.
Yeah. So I think in that case, she's probably a C tier character. Really, the only reason why I put her on here is because like she's about similar to Senya in the sense that it's going to be something you consider. Like, a lot of people have the characters that are above Senya and Choux here, right? And then like if you have to choose between the honorable mentions and Senya and Choux, I could kind of see people picking Choux, like a Choux imprint, or, you know, their first Choux over Iseria, Tamarinne, Vildred, right? Sorry.
Can we jump order and talk about the unit that chat peer pressured us into and talk about Alencia? Because I think she fits in nicely with the discussion, because she's kind of the exact same situation as Senya and Choux, and much like the past 3 units we've talked about, Senya, Choux, and Politis, she's on that selective summon for Chapter 2 as an option. So it's an additional place you could have gotten her. And I'm just not sure we're going to have a different, unless you've got something to add, I'm not sure we're going to have a different conversation about it. You've got the nightmare to fight that is Senya, you've got the nightmare that is the RNG of Choux, and you've got the nightmare that is constant injury spamming into your HP scalers that is Alencia. But even though they do 3 different tricks, are they really different units as far as applicability in gameplay at early to mid game? I would, even through end game.
If, you know, not to say that we're going to rate each tier, like, or describe each tier differently, but if I could like put a name to each like tier, like a word to describe each tier, I think C tiers would definitely be like luxury. Like these are characters that I think are not by any means like necessity, like a necessity in order to climb or do well. But if you have these characters, and especially if you have them well geared, and, you know, you're looking at this tier list list and you're trying to find out who you think you should pick, you would probably do better with either another copy of like a Choux for crit chance. You have like a Senya now to, you know, fuck around with people in Guild War. Or you have an Alencia to now beat up the Senya and Choux comp that, you know, we just mentioned before in Guild War, which is like really nice. Could you have probably also cleaved Senya Choux or done something else to the Senya Choux? You know, maybe even like Yulha, Destina, and Roana. Probably, you probably could have, and there's a reason why Senya and, or sorry, I should say, there's a reason why characters like Lua or, you know, Yulha and Krau are above them. Like there's answers to other characters, and that's why I think they stay in the C. We now have, I think, the most probably like controversial pick that we have on here aside from Lua. What do you think about Aria?
Yeah, you go fight with me on this one.
Yeah, I am gonna fight with you on this one for sure.
Okay, so Lua does two things really, really well. At a high gear level, she can be a must ban or a I win button, depending on how smart your opponent is. In some RTA comps, she can be practically an auto in a lot of Guild War and even some arena comps. Yep. She's so good at that gear level. At a crap gear level, though, she's useless in those roles.
Yep.
But at a crap gear level, she is the key part of the lowest gear requirement Wyvern 13 one-shot, and I mean lowest free gear. I could make a Wyvern one-shot with this unit and 3 other free units, probably in the first week, maybe week and a half of playing EpicSeven, knowing what I know. And that's not average, but she gives you access to a Wyvern 13 one-shot faster than any other unit in the game. And there are floors in Abyss that are either not possible or are only possible with higher end gear or a lot of RNG that you can just slap Aria on the team and press auto.
Yep. With
that crap gear. I've had people, how do I beat this floor? Put Aria on the team. Okay, what do I do now? You press auto. No way. And then they DM me back, I was like, holy crap, that worked. I'm like, yeah, she's that heckin' good. So she's a bit of a conundrum. If it wasn't for the fact that she is incredibly difficult to gear for that high-end stuff and the fact that she's a raging racist, I would put her in A tier.
Okay.
Really, if you read the news story, she couldn't get like 2 lines into the news story without being a racist. but I digress. I would put her in A tier if she had like Politis level gearing, but she doesn't.
Do you think
use her on top end? I think she's a B tier unit. I think just because of how much PvE she opens up for you, and then eventually when you do get the gear, she's future proof into higher end content. I wouldn't put her in C. I'd put her in B tier because she immediately has a usage with crap gear and later has other great uses as well.
What would you think of her as being a second split character like Lua, where you have her like a usable, like proper, like you have the gear for her, like the AI gear that we just got, like is very good. Like, you know, you got some good AI gear. We put that in A, and we have a second one that's like a C tier, like you're kind of coping. Or do you think it really is just
I think that, I mean, I was going to put her in B tier, but you could split her into A and C.
I mean,
where
actually,
A is her with great gear, and C is just her PvE usages. Seka, look up Prof Boy's YouTube channel. He's got a fantastic video about it with some of the worst gear you've ever seen. Wyvern one-shotting, it's unbelievable.
Okay, so I do agree with you a lot of things. Abyss floors aside, because, you know, personally, I haven't done enough investigating with, my God, it's been like, Jesus,
been a hot minute.
It has been a minute. So I've definitely not investigated with Abyss. However, I did see the Prof Boy video. That's pretty incredible. It is a bit RNG.
Has it been only a year? Feels like it was pre-COVID. It really does.
I'm not talking about the challenge floor, by the way. I'm
challenge,
talking about, yeah, like floor whenever 110 to 120 came out, or 111 to 120. That it has been a fucking minute. And the other thing is, again, so as someone, you know, I don't have like the greatest reputation as a Guild War hitter. The guild that I was just a part of last season, we ended top 20. So I think, like, relatively speaking, I kind of have an idea of like the teams that you can run. Again, now the caveat, I'm no star-studded Guild War offense player. However, I didn't have a single moment where I needed to use Aria. Now again, I have speed gear, but even in some situations, like I didn't particularly care for the Destina Christie Aria comp that I think some people were running around with. That comp to me was a little too tough, just because like getting the ER gear spread around and having to re-gear every time, a little tough. And I'd even seen people with that comp die against like whatever the comp was supposed to kill. So I never really like sold myself into Aria. I think in RTA she's a must ban when she's picked. like properly. Like the one shot does make it really funny, or like, you know, there is great value for like the one shot, which is like great value, especially because the alternative is like, hey, you want a 15% comp, or like, hey, do you have, you know, a limited character in the form of Rem? Both are kind of capped. When she does have bad gear, I think it is almost equivalent to, as you mentioned, the Senya and Choux thing. I know I'm basically agreeing with everything you said, so I'll say less, but yeah, bad gear Aria, almost probably not even worth it. Basically just book collecting at that point. Good Aria with gear is like a real RTA threat, a real Guild War threat. Can be used in a lot of situations.
Name a Wyvern one shot that doesn't use ML or limited or top end units. The nice thing about it is you get her from the story summon, and you've got your one shot team. There are better one shot teams. A lot of people gave probably crap for that video because they're like, well, just do this, it's better. It's like, yeah, the gear and the accessibility.
Yeah.
You do one story summon, you get this unit, and you've already got the other units for free. You put the starter gear on it, and you're auto farming Wyvern 13 as a one shot team. It's insane to be able to have access to that level of gameplay within the first few weeks of joining EpicSeven. It's just too good not to mention her.
Okay, but again,
and to answer your question, today in 2021, that's when we got Abyss 120.
That was literally 2 years ago.
Yeah, almost to the day.
And again, we're not saying that you necessarily have to use Aria. We're by no means making her like a mandatory like everything, but just how much freedom you're given when you pick Aria, like a well-geared Aria. You know, most Guild War teams that have any form of APOC on it just die the second that Aria is there. And, you know, even in RTA, sometimes when the enemy is drafting very poorly, Aria is the 5th pick. If we could pick Ida, or if we were rating this just off of RTA, Ida would be in a similar situation to Aria, where, yeah, maybe you're not going to pick it on 3-4, but when you pick it on 5, that shit's getting banned every day of the week, and that's pretty good value. In addition to, again, being usable in Arena, being usable in RTA, or, you know, RTA, Guild War, Hunt now, you know, like as we just mentioned, Abyss. We basically haven't mentioned a piece of content that you can't use her in, which is why I think it's perfectly fine to leave her in A and C, or in other words, if you want to, you know, consolidate, B. But as we wrap this down, and I do want to, you know, we're getting towards the end of it, so I just want to, if you have any character that you want to make like a brief mention, or why you would consider pulling them from the not available in story summons section, that is a section that, although it does say not available in story section, you can vouch for any of them. Like I'll go first, I guess, if you want to like kind of see what I'm going, or like the way that I'm going to approach it, but just kind of brief, because again, these are characters that I almost feel like is kind of like a collection thing. Okay, so as we wrap down the section, I'm going to just mention the not available in story summons section, because, you know, it is worth mentioning some of the characters that aren't accessible, you know, through other means, and, you know, don't have a guaranteed way to summon them without waiting for a banner. So as we can see here, there is some justification for picking someone like Ken, who's great in Guild War, or I shouldn't say Guild War, in Ancient Inheritance, which is like his best situation. There are some giga outdated like Wyvern 13 one-shots that involve him that almost aren't even a one-shot at this point because of how bad it is. There is some value in having, you know, any of these characters as a collection log, and characters like Fireball, Tenebria, like even Leica may have uses in PvE or in Guild War and RTA. However, in general, they aren't that worthwhile unless if you really, really enjoy the character, really like the character, or are just trying to collect, you know, 100 log. There are some characters that are good for imprints, by the way, you know, just as a heads up. Emma Leica's imprint is pretty crazy. Kayron's imprint is also kind of nice for Kayron himself. That's basically it, but what do you think, Tristan?
I'll go from left to right real quick. Ravi, not usable anywhere, even with the best gear in the game, only niche uses, and you probably had a better option other than Ancient Inheritance. Arunka, not usable anywhere unless you have some of the best gear possible, then she can be used in some RTA fights and possibly Guild Wars. Ken, not usable anywhere except Ancient Inheritance. Firementha, not usable anywhere unless you have Giga gear and just love the unit, still not really usable. Leica, you got to have really, really good gear, and even then, she's still really hard to use anymore. Ludwig, mostly usable to put on adventure and watch him run because his run animation is cool as fuck. But other than that, he's only usable in a style of cleave that doesn't really exist anymore. Tenebria, not usable anywhere that other units aren't better options. Mercedes basically killed her niche. Kayron, actually a fantastic unit, and I might have fought for him to be on this tier list because Kayron is a great anti-cleave unit. And the better your gear gets, the better he gets in general. I would actually recommend Kairon as either an honorable mention pick or even a C tier pick, because you can do some neat things with Kairon. More and more counters are coming out, and as more counters come out for him, his value continues to just go down. It'll never really go up. Elagos is one of the coolest looking units. I was really hoping he would be the MC for Chapter 5, and I love mine, but he's 300 speed. If you aren't building yours that fast, you aren't going to use him anywhere. Mui, probably one of the most underrated and underappreciated units of the game. The only warrior who can give target on her skill. She gives dual attacks. She gives attack buff on her S3. She strips buffs. I'd love to see Canna spend a day forcing himself to use this unit at top end, because I think he could do some sick things with it.
I did.
Yeah.
Anyways, continue going on. Fire Litica.
Maybe I'm wrong. Litica not used outside of some niche PvE like Advents or the occasional Hall of Trials. Says with the most incredible gear possible, you can make this magic hand guy, magic hand boy, almost work in Guild Wars. Big old quotes around almost. And Bala Sazan, creepy as he is, he's still one of the best units for Earth Expedition, and he's not used anywhere else.
Just to add like a little tack on, it will feel really fucking bad. Just a few things. It will feel fucking terrible. Like, you will probably feel like you just shot yourself in the stomach if you pick Kairon when Veronica just got released to the game, because she like literally removes the immortality. And just as a final like 2 notes,
I wasn't even thinking about her, but you're a giga right on that. Kairon's dead. Kairon gets his wish and gets to die.
Yeah, Mui is really nice for the strip, but like again, she has no CR push, which sucks, but she does give, the strip and the attack buff. And Sens can actually one-shot Aiden without touching her. Very unique trait. Very unique trait. However, you're fucking Sens. So anyways, if there's nothing else, like you're okay with the order, is there anything you particularly want to fight for?
Nope, I agree that you could consolidate the Luas into A tier, just like you could consolidate the Arias into B tier, but having them like this does make people look at it and say, why do I see it twice? And get the answer before they pull, so I kind of like that.
Okay, so as you could tell, guys, like there was a bit of RTA, PvE, new player focus, like at times, like some factors to consider when you're looking at the tier list. If you've made it to this part of the video, thank you so much. As you can, as is always is tradition with these sort of things, people always ask why there's dupes of certain characters. The Arias is because it's been, it's dependent on gear, because like a really shit Aria is going to be terrible, but a really well geared Aria is going to do better. Same thing with Lua. A Lua with no speed is like, it's tough for me to go lower than B, but if you are Elf Mage or if you are someone who's a better speed cleaver, whatever, that character is fucking broken. So with that in mind, that's gonna be it for this video though, guys. As always, if you enjoyed today's content, make sure to like, comment, turn the notification bell. Let me know what you think about the characters, what you think Tristan and I, if we were right, if we're wrong, if you think there's any characters that should be included, not. But Tristan, as we wrap things down, is there anything else you'd like to say before we go?
No.
Okay, that's a good way to end it. Thank you so much, Tristan. I'll see you guys all next time. Make sure to, actually, before we go, make sure to follow on Discord, Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, all that jazz, guys. I'll see you all next time. Adios.